All right, welcome aboard, and this is going to be our first session with Adobe Illustrator. Adobe Illustrator is especially good for making things like diagrams, logos. You'll find out later what's called an infographic. And if you are in my graphics class or had my graphics class, this is one of those times, but there's going to be some overlap. We're going to be covering some things that you may have already covered in the graphics class, and that's just kind of unavoidable. So stick in there through it if you would, and we'll make the best of it. All right, well, first of all, Adobe Illustrator is located, if you go to the Start button and go to All Programs, you want to look for this Adobe, I think yours will say Design and Web Premium CS6. Anyway, look for CS6. You probably also have CS5, but you want to use CS6 here. And Adobe Illustrator, and actually I think I opened the wrong one, Adobe Illustrator will be inside there. Here's one that I have right here. Now, you could create a shortcut for it. You could right-click, send to desktop, and create a shortcut. As you know, those disappear every once in a while, but you certainly could create a desktop shortcut if you wish. I have one over here that I'm going to use to start Adobe Illustrator. I want to show you what this first session is all about. I'm going to show you some Illustrator tricks that I want you to know about here. And if it will help you, I've got Illustrator running here, but I want to, for just a moment, if you go to Start and go to Computer, and you get to Drive L, and go to Period 7, and go to Assignments, and go to Illustrator, and go to Session 1. That's what we're in. I do have this Project 1 shapes right here. I have a little guide here. If you double click that, it will load that up, and I know that at least some of you like to use these, and it is kind of important to look at this, because here, let's go through this a little bit. We're going to create using some shapes. It's a 50-point project here. What you're going to do is open a file, open a document called Shapes, and then use the shapes that are there to create an original image. All right, now the file is located on Drive L inside, and I'll show you this in just a minute. It's inside the Assignments folder, inside the Illustrator folder, inside the Session 1 folder. It's all tucked away in there, and it's called Shapes. All right, and you're going to use those shapes to build an original image. Now, the scoring of this works this way. In your final combination of the images, if you use 15 shapes or more, or 15 shapes, that gets you 30 points, and that's a 30 out of 50, that's a D. I'm sorry, using less than 15 gets you 30 points, and that's a D. Now, if you use 15, 16, or 17 shapes in your final combination, you'll see what I mean in just a minute, that gets you up to 35 points, and that's a C. Using 18, 19, or 20 shapes gets you up to 40 points, and that's a B. If you use 20, 21, 22, or more shapes, you're up to 48 points. And if you use 22 or more shapes and change color of some of the shapes, then you're at an A plus, 50 out of 50. Okay. Now I've got some tips here that I'm going to be demonstrating in this movie so that you can see how they work. Okay, but let's go back to Illustrator here for a minute, and what I'll do is I'm going to click File, click Open, and I will run over to Drive L. Our Courses Drive. This is the way you'll do it too. This is how you'll get started. Courses Drive, Period 7, Assignments, Illustrator, and this is Session number 1. Inside here is an Illustrator file called Shapes, and you open that up. Here is what it looks like when you open it up. The middle part, this big area in the middle, is an artboard. That's where you do your work. And kind of gathered around the outside of the artboard here are a variety of shapes: rectangle, square, rounded rectangle, circles, ovals, stars, hexagons, you know, all kinds of things here. Okay, what you have to do is build something out of these shapes. But there are some tricks and some tips that I have for you, and they're all on this handout, so I want to show you what we're talking about here. First of all, let's talk about color a little bit. If I take this rectangle right here, it's a white rectangle. If down here on the bottom of the tool panel, and we'll be learning about these tools as we go, but at the bottom of the tool panel, and right now, by the way, I'm just using the black arrow tool to select these things and move them around. But at the bottom of the tool panel, you'll see this white box and a black box here. These are for the fill and the outline. The black is for the outline and the white is for the fill of this shape. And if I select this rectangle and I select this white box right here and then double click it, I can come here and I can fill that shape up with whatever color I want. See, now that shape is filled up with blue. Now the same thing is true here on the outline. Right now it has a little black outline on it. If I double click on that black box here, I could change the outline color to something else if I wanted to. I could make it have like a red outline if I wanted to. Now you won't see the outline too well unless maybe you come up here to the top where it says stroke and you bump it. It says stroke 1 point and you just bump that up a little bit, and now you can really see that red outline. So it really kind of depends on what you want it to look like. This box, I just filled it up with blue and gave it a red outline. Okay, well, so you can do that with any of these shapes. You can click the shape, and remember, down here at the bottom of the tools panel, this black frame thing is for the outline. Well, okay, so if I double click that and I say, all right, let's give it a green outline. In the white box here, if you click that and then double click it, and you say, well, okay, let's fill this up with black, or whatever you want. You find the color you want here and you fill it up. All right, and again, this has a very thin green outline on it. You almost can't see it. So if I come up here to where it says stroke 1 point, I can bump that value up a little bit, and now you can see that I have this black box with this green outline. So you can change the color of these shapes to be whatever you would like for them to be. Okay, now let's get on to some of the other things that you're going to be doing here. Sometimes it's going to help to have more than one copy of something. Okay, so if you want to do that, for example, if I want more than one circle like this, here's what you do. Use the black arrow tool, hold down the Alt key, and drag that circle. Now you can let go of the Alt key then, but again, you got to hold down the Alt key and click and drag this, and you can make extra copies of any shape that you want. Now, one other tip here, when something is selected with the black arrow, you'll see the handles around it, and you can make these as big as you want to make them. All right, you can size them up however you want. If you wind up with extras, if you've got, let's say I've got these extra circles here and I don't want them, you can click them with the black arrow and then touch the delete key on the keyboard and they're gone. All right, so you can size them, you can shrink them, you can move them to different locations, just use the black arrow, and you can Alt drag them to make extra copies. All right, so what else do we have here? We've talked about resizing. Now sometimes you want to resize and keep the proportions or something. For example, I'm going to take this square and let me fill that up with something else so you can see it a little bit better here. I'll fill it up with a blue color. There we go. Now that's a perfect square right now. If I hold down the Shift key while I resize that, it locks it in and makes it stay a perfect square. If I let go of the Shift key, I can do all kinds of things to it. But if I hold the Shift key, it locks it into perfect square proportions. All right, so that's a nice little tip to know about. So holding the Shift key will lock it in. If you want to rotate a shape, you can do it this way. One way is just sneak up on a corner handle, and when you see that little curve appear, you can rotate a shape if that would help you in what you're making. All right, let's say that I have this oval over here, which I'll change the color of so you can see it a little bit better. I don't want it to be white on white, and I'll make it a little bit bigger. Now if I wanted to rotate that, I could just sneak up, just take that mouse up toward a corner handle, and when you see that little curve appear, you can just rotate it around just like that. All right, not too hard there. We've talked about color. You can change the color of the fill or the outline. You can change the thickness of the outline. Showed you how to do that. Now here's something that will happen sometimes when you're building a shape or a picture here. Let me see if I can give you a good, well, here's just a quick example. Right now, and let me rearrange some pieces here. This, I've got this kind of oval shape, this brownish oval shape is sitting on top of the black circle. If you're ever in a situation where, boy, I want that to like disappear behind that, I want this oval to be behind the circle, here's what you can do. You can right click, go to Arrange, and then you have all of these options right here. I say Send to Back here, you'll see now that oval shape that I had is behind the black circle. Okay, so that can be real helpful sometimes if you're trying to create a certain kind of look or a certain kind of shape or a certain kind of picture out of some shapes. You can rearrange the pieces a little bit. Here's another quick example of that. Right now, that black circle is sitting on top of the blue square. All right. Now I could do it either way. I could click the blue square and then do a right click, arrange, and say let's bring that to the front. Now the blue square is in front of, or on top of, if you prefer to think of it that way, it's on top of the black circle. All right, so these are all just tips that that are helpful. Now, if you want to see more detail of your work, you can hold down the Control key and tap the plus key on the keyboard, and it will zoom you in really tight on what you're working on. Control and minus, tap the minus key, will zoom you out. If you ever just want to fit the artboard and all the stuff that's around the artboard in the screen, you can do Control 0 on the keyboard, and that just fits it right into the window. So Control plus is zoom in, Control minus is zoom out, Control 0 will fit it into the window. And then if you are zoomed in, let's say that I'm kind of zoomed in on something I'm working on here, and I want to move the artboard around, if you hold down the space bar, you'll see that little hand icon, and I can just drag the artboard around and move it so I can see different parts of what I'm working on. So again, if I zoom in with Control plus, hold down the space bar, I can just drag this around and move it. So now let's think more about what kinds of things can you make. Well, okay, it's really kind of up to your imagination. I'm going to do this here for a minute. I'm going to click File and click Open and run and get my example of this, and we'll get into classes and apps and illustration and shapes demo. Here's what I made. All right. Now you remember your grade here kind of depends on how many different shapes you use, and I want to point something out to you here. I wound up using like the oval and the curves and things that are available. I didn't really show you. They're hiding over here on this side. There's a curve, a couple of different curves, and a flat line. And again, with those, you can change the thickness. If you come up here, you can make them thicker if you want to. You can change their color. Right now, that if I go to this box, the black frame at the bottom of the tool panel, that's black right now, but I can double click that and I can make that line any color I want to make it. I must not have had that selected. There we go. Now it's green. There we go. Much better. So you see I can change the color of these lines, and I can change their thickness by using the controls that I've showed you here. So again, this is a matter of just kind of using your imagination and putting things together the way you want to put them together. And let me tear this thing apart a little bit and show you a little bit about how I'm going to count when it comes time to count for your grade. First of all, every one of these stars counts. All right, they all count. And remember, you got to have 22 plus you got to change some colors in order to get to where you're going to get an A+. Well, I've got 8 stars there, so, and all of those count. Okay, and I did that by doing that Alt drag thing. I got those stars on there by holding the Alt key and dragging to make extra copies. So those all count if you Alt drag. Hey, here's one thing you could run into. If you're working around with a shape and you accidentally double click it, you might have this happen to you. It could kind of turn gray around here, and now the only shape that is really working here is the black circle or the black square, and then everything else is just like grayed out. Well, it's because you could accidentally double click on something, and that will happen. The way to fix that is double click in an empty space on the artboard. Find an empty space and double click, and that will well, so that's your first project in Adobe Illustrator, is to open up that file. Remember, it's located on Drive L, and you open up that file and you take those shapes and you try to make something out of it. What you make is up to you. 22 pieces or more plus changing colors gets you the full credit. Hey, I think it's time for you to have at it. Let's see what you do. Off you go.